And that's when the lightning and thunder really started in force. Hi everyone. So I go back into the field in about a month, and when thinking about the upcoming fieldwork, I decided that I want to start a new series on this channel that I call Fieldwork Stories. And the idea is to take some of the experience I've had in about my decade-ish career as a wildlife biologist and tell these stories to you all about moments in the field. Some of them might be positive, some of the incredible, wonderful, amazing things I've seen, while others may be some of the more stressful or sometimes terrifying moments that can happen in the field, and sort of analyze the situation, describe my thought process, and try to walk you through what happened, what I think after the fact I could have done differently, if anything, that kind of thing. And so with that said, let's go ahead and get started on the first of these fieldwork stories. And the first one really is one of the most intense moments I've had as a wildlife biologist, and that was getting trapped on a super tall ridgeline in the southern Cascades during an unexpected and rapid lightning storm. So how did this all happen? So I was hired as a field technician on what was called the Cascades Carnivore project, which was a project that was devoted to trying to find evidence of rare, endangered mountain red foxes and wolverines in the southern Cascades. And it was a project that involved a lot of backpacking and hiking in these trails in vast areas of wilderness in some of the most beautiful country I've ever experienced. In particular, we were looking for the scats of mountain red fox that we would collect in these vials and put alcohol in them and preserve them for future genetic analysis. And we were also checking camera traps that were laid out in the wild. And on one of the last days of the project, I found myself hiking through the Goat Rocks Wilderness, which is part of the Pacific Crest Trail that goes through some of the most unbelievably picturesque and spectacular parts of the Pacific Crest Trail in Washington. Just this unbelievable ridge surrounded by glaciers on both sides of you and a gigantic drop off down to the ground. And it's just, it's absolutely a beautiful, amazing walk. And so basically I had a 4-day backpacking trip ahead of me. And on the second night, I was camped down at the valley below after crossing this beautiful glaciated ridgeline and went down into the forest, and it was all very sunny. I got the camera trap I was looking for. Everything was going really well. And my job required me to turn around and hike back in the direction I originally came down this ridgeline, up onto the top of this ridgeline and then around. And while I was on that hike back, I started up the ridgeline and I started to see these clouds that were going through the air, these kind of dark formations that looked like a storm were starting to come. And this was before I had a smartphone or anything I can actually check the weather with. And so I decided to watch what the clouds did, because I really didn't want to get in a situation where I was caught in a lightning storm at the highest point of this ridge, because the highest point of this ridge is about 7,400 feet. The valley below me is about 3,000. So this is a massive difference in elevation. And if you're at the very top of this thing without any cover at all, without any ability to seek shelter, then you're in a bad place, right? Because the steepest parts of this, I can't set my tent up there, I can't do anything like that. And so I also can't really go down into the valley below me as an option, because I need to go the opposite direction in the following day. And so instead of taking all of that time and all of that distance to go back into the valley, I decided that I would set up my tent for a time and found a little grassy patch on the ridge and just wanted to see what the storm was going to do. And what started out as these kind of sets of really fast moving clouds, the first of the waves of rain and lightning started coming in. And I still thought that maybe the storm was going to blow over until a much larger cloud system came in on me and just completely engulfed my tent and everything else on the ridge. It was one of those cases where you're literally inside the storm. It's not that rain is coming down onto you from outside and so you hear all the droplets on the edge. This was a case where I was inside the rain cloud, and so everything was just saturated with water, and that's when the lightning and thunder really started in force. So I don't know if you've ever been in a lightning storm in the mountains before, but it's such a different experience than when you're on flat land. Because on flat land, you tend to have just like a single thunderclap, maybe a bit of reverberation, but most of the time you have one lightning bolt, one thunderclap. when you're in the mountains, it becomes a much more confusing endeavor. And so when I was on top of this ridge, lying in my tent, there would be a giant bright flash of lightning and soon after a thunderclap. But that thunderclap would be bouncing off of several different mountains and rocks and cliffs. And so it was just this confusing cacophony of sounds where different thunder blasts were bouncing off of each other. And it was very, very intense. And so in the moment, it was quite terrifying because while I'm not at the highest point in the landscape, I'm pretty close to it. And so basically what I ended up doing was camping out through the night. It was very obvious that walking back up the ridge was going to be a pretty intense, pretty dangerous experience. And so basically I decided I'd wait until morning and then figure out my options from there. Now, I found in fieldwork that Murphy's Law tends to apply a lot. And so this is the idea that what can go wrong will go wrong. And in this case, it got worse because when I woke up in the morning, I was starting to get sick, and like really sick, like the kind of sick that I had prior to getting pneumonia several years before that. And so my sinuses were just completely shot. I felt a little bit weak, a little bit not so lucid. And so after getting a hold of the field crew leader, we decided that it was definitely not safe for me to continue on my original path. And so what I had to do was work my way back down off of the mountain into the valley and then find a certain trail that would then lead me to the gate of a different road. That particular road was locked off, and so that had an extra 5 miles of following this gated road. And so my whole trip back was going to be about 14 miles of hiking from the top of this ridge to the place where I was going to meet one of the crew members. And, you know, I was weak, really tired. I had about 3 hours of sleep, not even necessarily consecutive because of all of the lightning and thunder blasts and this stuff. But basically, I just knew that my only real option was to meet them at this point, 13, 14 miles away. And so just took my pack, loaded it all up. I had my rain gear, but I was still completely soaked because it was so wet that just everything around you becomes saturated with water. And I worked my way down, made the hike back, and was never more grateful for a truck with a heater in it in my life, and I still haven't. I was just so soaked with water and so cold and so tired that being able to get into the truck and just feel the blast of the heat from the heater was amazing. So if I were to dissect this event and look for like a moral of the story and ask, you know, what was the point? What did I learn from it? One of them is that there are often situations in wildlife biology when there is no one right course of action and one wrong course of action. I was basically in a situation where I had to choose between different scenarios with different drawbacks. I ended up camping out on the ridge, and as a consequence, I was caught on this ridge in the lightning storm. But everyone who's been in the forest for some period of time knows that the forest itself could be just as dangerous during a lightning storm because a lot of those trees will have roots that are not terribly well grounded, and so when the ground becomes saturated with water and you have wind blowing across, those trees can fall over and they can potentially crush you if you're down there. Earlier that season, I had actually missed a very large tree falling on the trail I would be walking on by about 40 seconds. So I was really quite aware of that risk. And so basically, when you're in those situations, you just need to ask yourself what the different risks are, what the drawbacks might be for each course of action. And I took one and had its own particular consequences. But if I'd have gone back into the valley, there'd be a completely different set of consequences that may have made things worse. So I think the one thing I really learned from it, and I hope you also learned from this story, is not to be completely lost in this mindset that there's one right course of action. If you're in the field and this happens, you must do this. You're always weighing costs and benefits, and sometimes you just have to choose between 2 or more different bad decisions and just roll with the consequences and see where it takes you. So don't feel too nervous or anxious if you decide that you have to do something that feels like a bad decision, because often there are only bad decisions. It's just a matter of figuring out how to deal with those consequences and work your way through them so that you can get out safely. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the first of these field stories. I'm definitely going to follow the next one up with something much less intense, much less danger-filled, but still an amazing, beautiful, incredible moment of the kind that you can find in the field. So with that, I think that's the end of this video. I'm going to be going back to the field about a month or so, and so you can expect a whole new kind of habitat and terrain. I'll be back in the Pacific Northwest and the coastal rainforest, and so you can see some of my videos of me wandering around in nature. I'm going to be doing videos on the field work I'm doing, that kind of thing. And so if you're interested in this content and aren't yet subscribed, please do so. I'd love your company here, and I really enjoyed the community I've been building so far, and the people who've been seeing these videos and getting some benefits from them, and just enjoying the way that I go around enjoying nature. And so hope you can join me, and until next time everyone, wander and wonder. Had a blast telling you this story.